Double whammies! Federal Reserve, Bolshevik Revolution, World War One. Man, when we gonna get to the good stuff, the creation of Bitcoin? The answer then. Well, guess what? For our ancestors, it only got worse. Couple whammies, then worse. Worse times. Much worse. The Great Depression. And who created it?
Shortly after World War I, the overall political agenda of the money changers began to be clear. Now that they controlled national economies individually, the next step was the ultimate form of consolidation, world government. The new world government proposal was given top priority at the Paris Peace Conference after World War I. It was called the League of Nations. But much to the surprise of Paul Warburg and Bernard Baruch, who attended the peace conference with President Wilson, the world was not yet ready to dissolve national boundaries. Nationalism still beats strong in the human breast.
Little bit more MK Ultra needed, little bit more propaganda, and if that doesn't work, let's kill bunch. The strongest, the most vital males especially, let's kill those. In a freaking meat grinder bloodbath sacrifice ritual. And especially focus on one ethnic group. But hey, you gotta do what you gotta do to manifest this.
For example, Lord Curzon, the British Foreign Secretary, called the League of Nations a good joke, even though it was the stated policy of the British government to support it. To the humiliation of President Wilson, the U.S. Congress wouldn't ratify the League either, despite the fact that it had been ratified by many other nations. Without money flowing from the U.S. Treasury, the League died. After World War I, the American public had grown
Guess what they did? Every time their plan failed, what have we learned thus far about the money masters? They came back stronger, United Nations.
Tired of the internationalist policies of Democrat Woodrow Wilson. In the presidential election of 1920, Republican Warren Harding won a landslide victory with over 60% of the vote. Harding was an ardent foe of both Bolshevism and the League of Nations. His election, which opened a 12-year run of Republican presidents in the White House, led to an unprecedented era of prosperity known as the Roaring Twenties. Despite the fact that the war had brought America...
Okay, they had a little bit fun in the 20s. But some places, other places, they had terrible time in the 20s, like in Weimar Republic.
A debt 10 times larger than its Civil War debt. Still, the American economy surged. Gold had poured into the country during the war, and it continued to do so afterwards. In the early 1920s, the governor of this bank, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, a man named Benjamin Strong, met frequently with the secretive and eccentric governor of the Bank of England, Montague Norman. Norman was determined to replace the gold England had lost to the U.S. during World War I and return the Bank of England to its former position of dominance in world finance. On top of that, rich with gold, the American economy might get out of control again, just like it had done after the Civil War. During the next 8 years, under the presidencies of Harding and Coolidge, the huge federal debt built up during World War I was cut by 38%, down to $16 billion, the greatest percentage drop in U.S. history. During the election of 1920, Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge ran against James Cox, the governor of Ohio, and the little-known Franklin D. Roosevelt, who had previously risen to no higher post than President Wilson's Assistant Secretary of the Navy. After his inauguration, Harding moved quickly to formally kill the League of Nations. Then he quickly moved to reduce domestic taxes while raising tariffs to record heights. Now, this was a revenue policy of which most of the founding fathers would certainly have approved. His second year in office, Harding took ill on a train trip in the West and suddenly died. Although
How many people in America know about this history? When a president starts to do the good things, the things that are logical to a well-working human brain that has enough DHA in it, suddenly some accident just happens, a boating accident, acute lead toxicity. We have couple different accidents. Pick one, and if a man in power starts to do the right thing, the logical thing, the accident manifests itself into reality. Seems to happen the best of us usually, unlike in the Hollywood Disney movies.
autopsy was performed, the cause was said to be either pneumonia or food poisoning. When Coolidge took over, he continued Harding's domestic economic policy of high tariffs on imports while cutting income taxes. As a result, the economy grew at such a rate that net revenue still increased. Now that had to be stopped. So just as they'd done so frequently before, the money changers decided it was time to crash the American economy. The Federal Reserve began flooding the country with money. They increased the money supply by 62% during these years. Money was plentiful. This is why it was known as the Roaring Twenties. Before his death in 1919, former President Teddy Roosevelt warned the American people what was going on. As reported in the March 27, 1922 edition of the New York Times, Roosevelt said, "These international bankers and Rockefeller Standard Oil interests control the majority of newspapers and the columns of these papers to club into submission or drive out of public office officials who refuse to do the bidding of the powerful, corrupt cliques which compose the invisible government." Just one day before, in the New York Times, the mayor of New York, John Hylan, quoted Roosevelt and blasted those he saw as taking control of America, its political machinery, and its press. The warning of Theodore Roosevelt has much timeliness today, for the real menace of our republic is this invisible government which, like a giant octopus, sprawls its slimy length over city, state, and nation. It seizes in its long and powerful tentacles our executive officers, our legislative bodies, our schools, our courts, our newspapers, and every agency created for the public protection. To depart from mere generalizations, let me say that at the head of this octopus are the Rockefeller Standard Oil interest and a small group of powerful banking houses generally referred to as the international bankers. The little coterie of powerful international bankers virtually run the United States government for their own selfish purposes. They practically control both parties, write political platforms, make cat's paws of party leaders, use the leading men of private organizations, and resort to every device to place in nomination for high public office only such candidates as will be amenable to the dictates of corrupt big business. These international bankers and Rockefeller Standard Oil interests control the majority of newspapers and magazines in this country.
Honestly, it does not take that much of brain power to realize this. But the sad thing is that most people don't even have that brain power. They don't have that capacity. Their brain is malfunctioning, is dysfunctional. Their lives, too much chaos, too much toxicity. So nothing works. their senses, their brain, their common sense. None of these things work, and they are distracted big time. Even then it was like this. Now it's 100 times, 1,000 times worse. But we have a couple answers. The economic answer is Bitcoin, which was created to destroy the Rockefeller Rothschild international bankers. If you look into who created the Bitcoin, it's the only answer, only hope for us. Get as much as you can while you still can. And the other answer to make our brains work again is go outside, go out there. Spend as little time with technology as you possibly can. Buy Bitcoin with technology, watch base science, and you can do both of those outside anyway. Naked on the sun. That's the ultimate FU to these international bankers.
Why didn't people listen to such strong warnings and demand that Congress reverse its 1913 passage of the Federal Reserve Act? Because remember, it was the 1920s. A steady increase in bank loans contributed to a rising market. In other words, just as it is today, in times of prosperity, no one wants to worry about economic issues. But there was a dark side to all this prosperity. Businesses expanded and became strung out on credit. Speculation in the booming stock market became rampant. Although everything looked rosy, it was a castle made of sand. When all was in readiness,
It always is. When you create these little castles, these little pyramids, with your little international bankers, fiat money, the Federal Reserve money, it could never be a great cathedral, a great pyramid, the great ancient works of art. It never could be like that. You need a decentralized form of currency, man-made little currency to do those. Even better would be just everybody just hanging with their tribes in the nature. That would be even better. But if you want to do this civilization money thing, we need a decentralized money to build good.
in April of 1929, Paul Warburg, the father of the Federal Reserve, sent out a secret advisory warning his friends that a collapse and nationwide depression was certain.
Funny how those guys always have the inside information. They always seem to make the right decision at the right time. What is going on over here?
In August of 1929, the Fed began to tighten money. It is not a coincidence that the biographies of all the Wall Street giants of that era, John D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, Bernard Baruch, etc., all marvel that they got out of the stock market just before the crash and put all their assets in cash or gold. On October 24th, 1929, the big New York bankers called in their 24-hour broker call loans. This meant that...
Guess how you can never be a victim to this plan, which could happen at any point. It still happens in the modern world all the time, maybe not in your country right now, but it can happen anytime, and that moment can be real close. And if you don't pay attention, you don't know when it's coming. Guess what the answer is? Bitcoin. Gold wallet. Hold your own shit. Don't put any freaking energy to these guys' system. That's how we destroy it. Nobody gives energy to it anymore. We have a better system available. And obviously they're gonna try to usurp that system. But guess what? That system is made bulletproof. with this international bankers bullshit, because the maker of the system made it knowing all of this knowledge very well.
Both stockbrokers and customers had to dump their stocks on the market to cover their loans, no matter what price they had to sell them for. As a result, the market tumbled, and that day was known as Black Thursday. According to John Kenneth Galbraith, writing in The Great Crash, 1929, at the height of the selling frenzy, Bernard Baruch brought Winston Churchill into the visitors' gallery of the New York Stock Exchange here to witness the panic and impress him with his power over the wild events down on the floor. Congressman Louis McFadden, chairman of the House Committee on Banking and Currency from 1920 to 1931, knew who to blame. He accused the Fed and the international bankers of orchestrating the crash.
It was not accidental. It was a carefully contrived occurrence. The international bankers sought to bring about a condition of despair here so that they might emerge as rulers of us all.
But McFadden went even farther. He openly accused them of causing the crash in order to steal America's gold. In February 1931, in the midst of the Depression, he put it this way.
Guess what happened?
I think it can hardly be disputed that the statesmen and financiers of Europe are ready to take almost any means to reacquire rapidly the gold stock which Europe lost to America as the result of World War I.
Curtis Dahl, a broker for Lehman Brothers, was on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange the day of the crash. In his 1970 book, FDR, My Exploited Father-in-Law, he explained that the crash was triggered by the planned sudden shortage of call money in the New York money market.
Actually, it was the calculated shearing of the public by the world money powers triggered by the planned sudden shortage of call money in the New York money market.
Within a few weeks, $3 billion of wealth simply seemed to vanish. Within a year, $40 billion.
Oops. Oopsie. So learn your history if you wanna have any chance.
Had been lost. But did it really disappear? Or was it simply consolidated in fewer hands? And what did the Federal Reserve do? Instead of moving to help the economy out by quickly lowering interest rates to stimulate the economy, the Fed continued to brutally contract the money supply further, deepening the Depression. Between 1929 and 1933, the Fed reduced the money supply by an additional 33%. Although most Americans have never heard that the Fed was the cause of the Depression, this is well known among top economists. Milton Friedman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist now of Stanford University, said the same thing in a National Public Radio interview in January of 1996. The Federal Reserve definitely caused the Great Depression by contracting the amount of currency in circulation by 1/3 from 1929 to 1933. But the money lost by most Americans during the Depression didn't just vanish. It was just redistributed into the hands of those who had gotten out just before the crash and had purchased gold, which is always a safe place to put your money just before a depression. But America's money also went overseas. Incredibly, as President Hoover was heroically trying to rescue banks and prop up businesses, with millions of Americans starving as the Great Depression deepened, millions of dollars were being spent rebuilding Germany from damage sustained during World War I. 8 years before Hitler would invade Poland, Representative Louis McFadden, chairman of the House Banking and Currency Committee, warned Congress that Americans were paying for Hitler's rise to power. After World War I, Germany fell into the hands of the German international bankers. Those bankers bought her, and they now own her lock, stock, and barrel.
They have purchased her industries. They have mortgages on her soil. They control her production. They control all her public utilities. The international German bankers have subsidized the present government of Germany, and they have also supplied every dollar of the money Adolf Hitler has used in his lavish campaign to build up a threat to the government of Brüning. When Brüning fails to obey the orders of the German international bankers, Hitler is brought forth to scare the Germans into submission. Through the Federal Reserve Board, over $30 billion of American money has been pumped into Germany. You have all heard of the spending that's taken place in Germany. Modernistic dwellings, her great planetariums, her gymnasiums, her swimming pools, her fine public highways, her perfect factories. All this was done on our money. All this was given to Germany through the Federal Reserve Board.
The pieces are starting to fit together. This was a master plan, and it worked incredibly well. Man, it's amazing. It gives me chills right now to think about this plan and how well it worked. Even still to this day. Like, this was the foundation after the Federal Reserve, the creation of Federal Reserve. This was the real foundation where we find ourselves into right now. This created the current atmosphere, the current matrix we have all been born in.
The Federal Reserve Board has pumped so many billions of dollars into Germany that they dare not name the total.
Franklin D. Roosevelt was swept into office.
And now they do the same thing to another country, which was born from this move, which was directly born from this little chess move.
During the 1932 presidential election. Once Roosevelt was in office, however, sweeping emergency banking measures were immediately announced, which did nothing but increase the Fed's power over the money supply. Then, and only then, did the Fed finally begin to loosen the purse strings and feed new money out to the starving American people.
Can't our ancestors catch a break, bro? Yes, 20s were pretty good, but man, living in 100 years ago in these countries and not being on the right side, it was pretty rough, just like it is right now. But now we got a couple options. We got a couple options. We got a couple counterattacks. So we got that. Well, you could have a couple counterattacks back then, which would probably be even better in some ways, in physiological ways. But anyway, that's today's lesson. Makes you wanna cry, but that's history. Who wrote? Whose story is it? Who is the he who wrote his story? Is it the Money Master's story that we have learned? We are learning right now. Go outside.